Officer Daniel Mercer had been on duty for only an hour when the quiet rhythm of the small town settled in around him. Ridgeview was the kind of place where most days felt the same: slow traffic, familiar faces, and the steady hum of routine. Daniel didn't mind it. After years working in a busy city precinct, the calm of Ridgeview felt like a second chance to breathe. People waved, kids rode bikes near the park, and nothing too dramatic ever happened. That afternoon, a soft golden light sat over the streets as the sun slid lower. Daniel drove his patrol car along the main road, watching for anything unusual. He wasn't expecting trouble, maybe a broken taillight or someone forgetting to signal. Simple things. The radio was quiet, and he could hear the soft buzz of the engine as he turned down a familiar stretch of road lined with tall oaks. As he reached the entrance of a quiet neighborhood, he noticed an older sedan ahead of him. It was moving steadily, but every so often it drifted just a little over the center line. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to catch his attention. Daniel watched it for another moment. Maybe the driver was tired, maybe distracted, or maybe the car simply needed an alignment. Still, it was his job to check. He flipped on his lights. The red and blue glow reflected against the back window of the sedan, and after a short pause, the car pulled gently onto the shoulder. Nothing abrupt, nothing panicked, just calm and slow. Daniel parked behind the sedan and took a breath. He didn't feel worried. His instincts, sharpened from years of experience, told him this was probably nothing serious. A small-town driver, maybe heading home from work, maybe thinking about dinner. Something simple. He stepped out of his patrol car and walked toward the driver's side window. The late afternoon breeze stirred the leaves overhead, making a soft rustling sound as he approached. Inside, driver sat still with both hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. He looked to be in his early 50s, with a bit of gray at his temples and a tired but peaceful expression. He didn't seem nervous, just quietly waiting. Daniel offered a polite nod and greeted him. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Officer Mercer with the Ridgeview Police Department. Do you know why I pulled you over?" The man gave a small, polite smile. "I'm guessing I drifted a little bit. I'm sorry about that." His voice was warm and steady, not defensive. "That's right," Daniel replied. "Are you feeling okay?" "Long day?" "Just a bit distracted, I suppose," the man answered. "Nothing serious." "Sorry about that." Daniel appreciated the honesty. "No problem. Could I see your license and registration, please?" "Of course." The man moved slowly, carefully, as if he understood the importance of keeping his motions clear. He handed over the documents without hesitation. His license identified him as Thomas Reed. Daniel took the papers and nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. I'll be right back with you." Reed nodded gently. "Take your time." Daniel walked back to his patrol car, feeling no tension in his shoulders. Everything about this stop felt normal. Reed wasn't acting strange. No shaking hands, no sudden excuses, no signs of panic. Just a man who drifted a little while driving. Still, protocol was protocol. Daniel sat in the driver's seat and entered Reed's information into the system. As he waited for the search results, he glanced back at the sedan in his mirror. Reed sat quietly, looking straight ahead. His posture relaxed. The sunlight filtered through the trees and cast long shadows on the pavement. Everything felt ordinary. Then the screen beeped. Daniel frowned and leaned closer. A bright red alert flashed across the monitor. This wasn't the usual expired registration or unpaid parking ticket. The system flagged the name Thomas Reed with an alert matching a major federal warrant from another state. Daniel blinked, confused. The alert didn't match what he had just seen. The man in the car did not behave like someone trying to hide from the law. He didn't fit the description of someone dangerous or unpredictable. He had been calm, polite, almost gentle. People on the run usually acted differently. Furtive, tense, overly apologetic, or overly argumentative. Reed had done none of that. Daniel double-checked the listed charges. They were serious enough that he couldn't ignore them, even with his doubts. He reread the note twice, trying to make sense of it. Something felt off. He had seen plenty of strange things in his career, but this one tugged at him. His instinct said this man wasn't who the warrant described, but the system said otherwise. Protocol was clear. Anything tied to a major warrant had to be handled carefully. Daniel knew he couldn't just walk back to the car casually now. He had to follow procedure. He radioed in for a second unit, his voice steady even though confusion buzzed in the back of his mind. "Dispatch, I need backup at my location. Possible warrant match." The dispatcher responded quickly, sending another officer his way. Daniel glanced again at Reed's car. The man still hadn't moved. No shifting in his seat, no watching the mirrors nervously. He looked like someone waiting patiently for a routine traffic citation. None of this makes sense. Daniel muttered under his breath. Within minutes, another patrol car pulled up behind his. Officer Hart, a younger officer full of energy and focus, stepped out and walked toward Daniel. "What's going on?" Hart asked. Daniel explained the situation. "The system says he's wanted for a major warrant, but he doesn't match the behavior. And something about the record feels wrong." Hart raised an eyebrow. "Still has to be treated as high risk, I know." They coordinated quietly. Hart would cover the passenger side. Daniel would approach the driver's side again. They weren't planning anything aggressive, just careful. Enough to stay safe. Daniel took a slow breath and walked back toward the sedan. The calm breeze from earlier now felt heavier, as if the air itself sensed the tension. He approached Reed's window again. This time, his voice was more formal. "Mr. Reed, I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle, please." Reed looked up at him calmly. No signs of worry. "Is everything all right, officer?" Daniel hesitated, just a fraction of a second before answering. "We just need to clear up a few things." "Please step out for me, of course." Reed opened the door and stepped out slowly. His movements were controlled and respectful. He didn't argue. He didn't ask too many questions. He simply followed instructions. Daniel's voice remained steady. "Sir, I'm going to place you in handcuffs for now. You're not under arrest at this moment. This is just for safety while we sort something out." Reed nodded with surprising calm. "I understand." His cooperation only deepened Daniel's confusion. He placed the cuffs on gently Reed, didn't resist or even look concerned. Hart kept watch from the other side of the car, but even he seemed puzzled by Reed's behavior. Neighbors passing by slowed their cars, curious but cautious. A couple walking a dog paused at the corner to glance over. In a small town, even a quiet stop could become a spectacle. Daniel guided Reed to the back of the patrol car. Reed sat down without complaint. He didn't demand answers. He didn't plead. He just looked out the window quietly, as if waiting for the next step. Daniel stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Something about the man's calm eyes bothered him, not in a threatening way, but in a way that said, "You're making a mistake. But I won't fight you on it." The strange feeling didn't fade. As he closed the door, Daniel told himself he was doing his job, but a heavier thought lingered in the back of his mind. What if the system was wrong? He walked back toward the other officer, his expression thoughtful. Nothing about this stop felt simple. Anymore, Daniel sat behind the wheel of his patrol car for a moment, staring at the bright red alert still glowing on the computer screen. It felt like the quiet rhythm of his day had been ripped in half by that single loud beep. The system kept insisting that the man he had just placed in handcuffs, a man who acted calmer than most people, stopped for a broken taillight, was wanted in another state for a major crime. But Daniel had learned long ago that instinct mattered, and every part of his instinct said something was wrong. He took a breath, pushed down the uneasy feeling twisting in his stomach, and started the car. Officer Hart pulled ahead to take the lead back to the station. Daniel followed, with Reed sitting quietly in the back seat, through the small mirror inside the car. Daniel watched Reed's face. The man looked out the window, not angry, not afraid, not even confused. Just calm. Too calm for someone supposedly facing a serious warrant. Daniel wished he understood that calmness. It didn't make sense. The drive to the station took only a few minutes, but every second felt stretched. Daniel kept replaying the stop in his mind, how normal Reed's behavior had been, how polite he was, how he followed every instruction without hesitation. Nothing about him felt dangerous. When they arrived at the station, Daniel parked in the back lot. The evening sun was lower now, casting long golden streaks across the pavement. Officer Hart walked inside ahead of them, while Daniel opened the back door of his patrol car. Reed stepped out slowly. His wrists were still cuffed, but he moved with a kind of quiet dignity that Daniel hadn't seen often. Most people in cuffs shifted nervously or kept looking around. Reed simply stood still. "Sir," Daniel said gently, "we're going to sort this out." "I need you to understand that," Reed nodded. "I know you're just doing your job." Something in his voice, soft, steady, forgiving, put another weight on Daniel's chest. It made him feel like he owed the man an explanation, even though he couldn't give one yet. Inside the station, the air was cool and smelled faintly of coffee from a pot that had probably been sitting there since morning. The station wasn't big. A few desks, a couple of interview rooms, and a fingerprint machine that had seen better days. Daniel led Reed to a small processing room. He removed the cuffs carefully, and Reed rubbed his wrists lightly but didn't complain. "I'm going to take your fingerprints now," Daniel said. "It's just part of confirming identity." "Whatever you need to do," Reed answered. Daniel motioned for him to place his hand on the scanner. Reed obeyed, his expression unreadable, as the machine hummed to life. The lines began to appear on the monitor, sharp and clear. The system took a moment to process. Daniel watched the spinning icon on the screen, the room suddenly feeling much smaller. Officer Hart stood behind him with his arms crossed. "You think it's him?" he asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer right away. "No," he finally said. "I don't." Hart shifted his weight. "The system says, I know what it says." Daniel didn't raise his voice, but there was a firmness in it. "But I've stopped real fugitives before. They don't act like this." Hart nodded slowly, though it was clear he trusted the computer more than instinct. The screen beeped. Daniel leaned in. The result popped up in bold letters. "No match found." Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He looked back at Reed, who simply met his eyes with a calm expression. "What does that mean?" Hart asked. Daniel swallowed. "It means his fingerprints don't match the man the system said he was." Hart frowned. "Then why the alert?" Daniel didn't have an answer. "That's what we need to find out." He turned back to Reed. "Sir, your prints don't match the person in the warrant, but your name does. Can you tell me anything about that?" Reed hesitated. A long, quiet hesitation. He looked down at his hands, then at Daniel. "There might be a reason," he said softly. Daniel waited, giving him space. Reed breathed in slowly. "Years ago, I was involved in something. Something that got buried. I was told it was over, that my records were sealed. I didn't think it would follow me here." Daniel felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. "What kind of something?" Reed shook his head gently. "Nothing I can talk about without the right people present. But I can tell you this. I am not the man in that warrant." There was no fear in his voice, only exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying a heavy truth for too many years. Daniel studied him again. Reed didn't look like someone hiding from justice. He looked like someone caught in something far bigger than he ever wanted. Hart checked the computer again. "Should we contact the agency that issued the warrant?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "We have to." But as he picked up the phone, he felt a strange knot in his stomach, like calling them might open a door. They didn't want opened. He dialed the number listed on the alert. After a few rings, someone answered. "This is Officer Mercer from Ridgeview Police Department," Daniel said. "I have a possible match on a warrant issued through your office. But there are inconsistencies." The voice on the other end sounded impatient. "Name Thomas Reed." There was a pause. "A long one, then." The voice said, "Hold." The line clicked softly, leaving Daniel listening to a faint hum. He waited. Hart waited. Reed sat quietly, his hands folded, his posture steady. Finally, the voice returned. "You have the wrong man. Release him immediately."
Oh.
Daniel froze. Hart's eyes widened. "What do you mean, wrong man?" Daniel asked. "You heard me?" "Release him," the voice repeated firmly. "And do not pursue further contact about this individual." That file should not have surfaced. Sir, with respect, something triggered the alert in our system that was an internal error. It has been corrected. Do not continue this inquiry. The phone clicked before Daniel could respond. He lowered the receiver slowly. A cold feeling spread through him. Hart raised an eyebrow. What was that? Daniel shook his head. They said release him. Just like that? Just like that. Hart rubbed the back of his neck. That's strange. Daniel looked at Reed, who met his eyes with a knowing expression, as if he expected this exact response. You knew they'd say that? Daniel asked softly. Reed didn't confirm or deny it. He simply offered a quiet smile. Some things stay hidden for a reason. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Not from fear, more from uncertainty. From the sense that he had just brushed against something he wasn't supposed to see, he let out a breath. You're free to go, sir. Reed nodded and stood up slowly as Daniel walked him to the front desk. Reed paused and turned slightly. I'm sorry this caused trouble for you, he said. Daniel shook his head. It's not your fault, but if something like this happened once, could it happen again? Reed looked toward the door as if thinking about the question. Then he said quietly, if it does, just remember that things aren't always what they look like on a screen. Daniel watched as Reed stepped outside into the cool evening air. The door closed softly behind him. Hart approached. So, what do we write in the report? Daniel stared at the empty space where Reed had stood. The truth, he said, as much of it as we're allowed to write. But even as he said it, he knew that part of the truth would always remain hidden in this simple traffic stop, the one he thought would be nothing. Had opened a crack into a world he knew he didn't fully understand. The uneasy feeling didn't fade, in fact. It was only getting stronger, the quiet of the evening wrapped around the station after Reed walked out the door. But it didn't feel like normal quiet. It felt heavy, unsettled, like the air was holding its breath. Daniel stood near the front desk long after Reed had disappeared from sight, replaying everything again and again in his mind. The alert, the mismatch, the tense phone call, the abrupt command to let him go. None of it made sense. Hart had gone back to his desk, trying to focus on paperwork, but Daniel could tell the younger officer was just as bothered. Every few minutes, Hart glanced toward Daniel like he wanted to ask something, but wasn't sure how. Daniel finally walked back to the processing room and stood where Reed had been only minutes before. The fingerprint machine was silent now, its screen dark. The small room felt different, like something important had happened. There's something invisible but powerful. He rubbed a hand across his forehead, let out a slow breath. Why do I feel like we missed something? He muttered. He wasn't sure if he meant the question for himself or the empty room. After a moment, he left the room and returned to the main area. The station was settling for the night, with officers trickling out after their shifts. Someone in the back room laughed at a joke. A coffee maker beeped loudly, signaling the end of a brewing cycle. Everything looked normal, but inside Daniel felt anything but normal as he walked toward his desk. He heard footsteps approaching from behind him. Chief Lawson stepped out of his office, closing the door quietly behind him. He was an older man with gray hair and a calm presence. Someone who usually had all the answers. Mercer, the chief called softly. Daniel turned. Yes, sir. Step into my office, will you? The chief's tone wasn't angry. It wasn't sharp. But there was something in it, something Daniel couldn't quite read. He followed the chief into the office. The door closed behind them, muffling the sounds from the rest of the station. Chief Lawson motioned for Daniel to sit. So, the chief began, leaning back in his chair. I heard you had quite the situation this evening. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, sir. The system flagged a man I pulled over, but his fingerprints didn't match. And when I called the issuing agency, they told me to release him and drop the inquiry. The chief listened without interrupting. His eyes narrowed slightly at the last part. Daniel continued, I followed protocol, but I can't shake the feeling something wasn't right. Dah! The chief tapped a pen lightly against his desk. And what exactly do you think wasn't right? Daniel hesitated. The man didn't act like someone hiding from a warrant. He wasn't nervous. He didn't lie. The fingerprint mismatch alone should have made the agency want more information, not less. But the moment I said his name, they told me to release him immediately. The chief sighed slowly, like someone who had heard something expected but hoped he wouldn't. He set the pen down and folded his hands. "Mercer," he said quietly, "sometimes things come across our desks that aren't meant to be dug into. You did what you were supposed to do. You stopped a vehicle, you checked the information, and when the agency clarified the error, you released the man." With all due respect, Daniel replied, "That wasn't clarification. That was shutting me down." The chief met his eyes. "Maybe, but that's as far as it goes, son. Understand?" Daniel felt a slight tightening in his chest. "Sir, if someone's identity is being mixed up like that, Mercer." The chief's voice was firmer now. "Let it go. Not every question gets an answer." Daniel swallowed hard. The chief wasn't being rude. He wasn't angry. But he was clearly drawing a line. "Yes, sir," Daniel said finally. The chief nodded. "Good. Off you go." Daniel stood up, feeling more conflicted than before. He left the office quietly. When he stepped back into the main area, Hart looked up. "Everything okay?" he asked. Daniel forced a small nod. "Yeah." Chief just wanted to talk, but Hart wasn't convinced. "About Reed." Daniel hesitated, then nodded again. "Yeah." "What did he say?" Daniel pulled in a slow breath. "He said to let it go." Hart leaned back in his chair. "And are you going to?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't know the answer yet. After his shift ended, Daniel grabbed his things and walked out into the night. The air outside was cool, the kind of clean, quiet night Ridgeview was known for. But tonight the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the town was hiding something. As he walked to his car, he saw the spot where Reed had stood earlier. He imagined the man walking away into the evening, carrying secrets Daniel didn't understand. He sat in his vehicle before starting it, staring through the windshield at the empty parking lot. Let it go. The chief's voice echoed in his mind. But Daniel couldn't let it go. At least not yet. He started the engine and drove home, replaying Reed's expression in the station. That calm, tired look. The way he said things stayed hidden for a reason. When Daniel arrived home, the house was dark and quiet. He kicked off his shoes and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Eventually, he poured himself a glass of water and took a long sip, hoping it would clear his thoughts. But it didn't. He reached for his laptop and opened it slowly, hesitating before typing anything. He felt like he was crossing a line he wasn't sure he should cross. Still, curiosity pulled him forward. He searched the name Thomas Reed, expecting to find maybe a common name, a few articles, something simple. But what he found was nothing. At least nothing that matched the man he had met. There were other people with the same name, business owners, college athletes, people from different states, but not a single result that fit the calm. Middle-aged man? He stopped today. No job listings. No social media. No public records beyond a basic license entry. It was like Reed barely existed. Daniel sat back in his chair, chill crawling up his spine. Ordinary people left footprints everywhere. Addresses, online posts, property records. Everyone had some kind of trail, but read DIDN single quotes. His phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. A text message from Hart. "You still thinking about it?" Daniel stared at the screen before typing back. "Yeah, you." A moment passed, honestly. Something about that man felt off. Not dangerous, just hidden. Daniel felt a strange relief that he wasn't the only one feeling it. He typed back, said he was involved in something years ago. "Something sealed," Hart responded. "Sealed like what?" "Witness protection?" Daniel froze. He hadn't thought of that. He swallowed, his heart thumping a little harder. Maybe he typed. Hart didn't answer right away. "Then, if that's the case, we probably shouldn't dig." Daniel stared at the message, remembering the way Reed had looked at him, those calm eyes, the quiet acceptance. He typed back, "Yeah, I know." He set his phone down and leaned back again. The thought settled somewhere deep inside him, uneasy but strangely fitting. If Reed had been part of something big, something dangerous, something buried, it would explain the sealed records, the fake alarm, the abrupt call from the agency. But knowing that didn't make Daniel feel any better, because if Reed was part of something that needed hiding, then the mistake that brought his name back up, a simple traffic stop, might be more than an error. It might be a warning. The next morning, Daniel was still tired when he walked into the station. He hadn't slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Reed's face or heard the sharp beep of that alert. He sat at his desk, trying to settle into the day when Hart approached with 2 cups of coffee. He set one on Daniel's desk. "You look like you didn't sleep," Hart said. Daniel gave a weak smile. "Did you?" Hart shook his head. "No, I kept thinking. If the system linked his name by mistake once, could it happen again?" Daniel nodded. "That's what worries me." As they talked, the station door opened. A woman walked in carrying a stack of envelopes. She wasn't from the department, Daniel could tell right away. Too polished, too formal, she approached the front desk, introduced herself quietly, and handed over the envelopes. The officer at the front desk looked confused, but accepted them. She nodded, turned, and left without another word. Daniel watched her walk out. Something about her presence made the hair on his arms rise. The officer at the desk sorted through the envelopes. "These are addressed to specific officers," he said aloud. He handed one to Daniel. Daniel looked down at it. "No return address." His name typed neatly in the center. Hart leaned over. "You gonna open it?" Daniel hesitated and tore the top carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A typed message: "Do not pursue the Reed case. This is not your concern." No signature. No official letterhead. Nothing. Hart's face paled. "Whoa, what is this?" Daniel's heart pounded. The chief's warning from the night before echoed in his mind. Not every question gets an answer. Daniel folded the paper slowly. "I think," he said quietly, "we just stepped into something bigger than we thought. I'm going to continue the story in the same simple, human-centered tone, keeping it natural and engaging without any headings. Here's part 3. The next morning arrived quietly, almost as if the world knew not to disturb the thoughts still lingering from the night before. The sun wasn't fully up yet, but a faint glow pressed against the curtains, hinting at a new day. For a moment, the room felt unusually still. No rush, no noise. Just a soft calm stretching across everything. When he finally opened his eyes, he lay there for a few seconds trying to make sense of the feeling in his chest. It wasn't worry. Not exactly. More like a gentle tension, the kind that comes when you know something needs to change but haven't decided how to start. He took a slow breath, letting the air settle. Then another. It helped. A little, he rolled out of bed and shuffled to the window. Outside, the street looked empty, with only a few early walkers moving at a comfortable pace. He watched them for a moment, wondering what their mornings were like, what thoughts filled their minds, what hopes they held quietly inside. It made him feel connected in a strange way. Like everyone was silently afternoon sun rested softly against the windows as he sat at the small table once again, this time with a bit more energy in his movements. The drink he had finished earlier still left a warm trace in his chest, and his mind felt lighter, as if something inside had finally loosened. He didn't rush into anything, though. Instead, he let the quiet of the room wrap around him for a few minutes. Knowing he needed a clear head before taking any new steps, he picked up his phone and looked at the photo he took earlier of the notice board. The weekend activity group. The idea sat with him in a strange wane, not too bold, not too small, just uncomfortable enough to matter. He zoomed in on the details, reading them again as if the words held some hidden message he missed the first time. Casual meets. Open to anyone who wants to try something new, it said. It sounded simple. It sounded safe. But it also meant stepping into a room full of new faces, new voices, new energy. And even though he wanted change, That part still scared him a little. He placed the phone down and leaned back in his chair. He remembered the way he felt that morning, writing in his notebook under the big tree. Those honest words, those small promises to himself. Part of him knew that ignoring the opportunity now would only drag him back into the same old loop. And he was tired of that loop. Tired in a way that reached all the way to his bones. He stood up slowly and paced across the room. Each step felt like he was thinking through his body, not just his mind. He went to the window and watched the street again, people walking, talking, carrying bags, heading somewhere. It made him wonder if anyone out there also felt the same slight fear of stepping into something new. Probably. Most likely. Everyone was dealing with something, even if they hid it well. After a quiet moment, he picked the phone back up and saved the event details. He didn't commit fully yet, but he made sure he wouldn't lose the information. That alone felt like a step forward. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. He cleaned up his living space a bit, dusting the shelves and folding things that had been left out for too long. There was something refreshing about bringing order into the room. It almost mirrored what he wanted to bring into his mind. Later, when the sun began to lower, he stepped outside again. The air had changed, slightly warmer, softer, carrying the late-day calm that made everything feel more manageable. He decided to walk without a plan, just following wherever his feet wanted to go. He found himself returning to the park almost by instinct. The paths were busier now, with kids playing, friends chatting on benches, and people walking their dogs. He watched all of it with a slow smile forming, not forced, but gentle. There was something comforting about seeing life happening so openly. He took a seat in a different area this time, near a small fountain where water trickled softly. The sound was steady and soothing. It was almost like background music that eased the tension inside him as he sat there. He noticed a group of people setting up a table not far from the fountain. They seemed cheerful, arranging papers and small items in neat rows. A tall banner stood behind them, waving lightly in the breeze. He couldn't make out what it said from where he sat, but he found himself watching them anyway. After a few minutes, curiosity pulled him to stand up and walk toward them slowly, not wanting to intrude. As he got closer, he could finally read the banner. A local community group, offering free help for anyone who wanted guidance with work, routines, or personal goals. He paused. This wasn't something he was searching for, but it felt like something that had been quietly searching for him. One of the volunteers noticed him standing there and gave a warm smile, not pushy, not overly cheerful, just gentle enough to make him feel welcome. "Hi there," the volunteer said. "Let us know if you have any questions. We're just here to help." Their tone felt sincere, the kind that didn't pressure or judge. He nodded politely but didn't speak right away. He wasn't sure if he wanted to help or if he simply wanted to watch for a bit. He stepped aside and observed the interactions happening around the table. People of all kinds came up, some curious, some hopeful, some shy. The volunteers listened carefully to each person, offering small bits of guidance or simply kind words. It wasn't a dramatic scene. Nothing intense or emotional. Just people quietly helping people. It softened something inside him. After a while, he approached the table again. This time, he felt a little more grounded. "I'm not sure what I'm looking for," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to figure things out." The volunteer nodded, as if those words made perfect sense. "That's more common than you think," they responded. "Sometimes you just need a place to start. It doesn't have to be big," he exhaled, feeling oddly relieved. He didn't know why talking to a stranger felt easier than talking to people he already knew. Maybe because strangers didn't expect anything from him. The volunteer offered him a small card with simple steps printed on it, nothing heavy. Just suggestions for building healthier routines, connecting with people, and setting easy goals. He took the card, thanked them, and stepped back to the fountain. Sitting down again, he read through the suggestions slowly. They were simple, too simple. But maybe simple was exactly what he needed. He tucked the card into his pocket and watched the water again. The light reflected on the surface in a soft shimmer, and for the first time all day, felt like he wasn't fighting against himself. As the evening settled, he headed home, footsteps slow but steady. Something inside him felt different. Not fully healed, not fully confident, but more open, more willing. When he reached his place, he placed the small card on the table next to his notebook. The two items sat side by side. It's like gentle reminders of the direction he wanted to move toward. He cooked a simple meal and ate quietly, letting the day sink in. There was no rush to decide what tomorrow would look like. No pressure to suddenly transform his whole life. It was enough that he had taken small steps toward connection. Steps toward clarity. Before bed, he opened his notebook once more. The page with his earlier words met his eyes again. He took a deep breath and wrote underneath them, "I think I'm ready to try." The sentence felt powerful in its simplicity. Honest, real. It wasn't a promise to anyone else. It was a quiet acknowledgement to himself. He closed the notebook gently and placed it on the nightstand. The room around him felt calmer than it had in a long time. He lay down and let the soft darkness settle. Tomorrow might bring more doubts, more questions. But tonight, he felt something small and steady inside. I hope that didn't feel forced. A hope that felt earned, and as he drifted into sleep, he knew this was only the beginning of the change he had been searching for. The next morning began gently, almost like the day itself was giving him space to breathe before anything new started. The light coming through the curtains felt softer than usual, not sharp or demanding. He opened his eyes slowly and lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the room. There was a calmness in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time, as if the weight he carried had become lighter overnight. He didn't rush to get up. Instead, he took a moment to remember the words he wrote before falling asleep. "I think I'm ready to try." They echoed in his thoughts, steady and reassuring. It wasn't a promise of perfection. It wasn't a sudden burst of confidence. It was something quieter, something deeper in understanding that the only way forward was to start, even if the steps were small. When he finally rose, he moved with ease, making a simple breakfast and letting the morning unfold naturally. He glanced at the small card from the community group resting beside his notebook. It reminded him that even small acts of support could make a difference. He ran his fingers lightly over the edges before placing it in his pocket. As he got dressed, familiar nervousness began to flicker inside him. Today was the day of the weekend activity group he had found on the notice board. He had saved the event details, but he still hadn't decided whether he would actually go. Part of him wanted to push himself toward it, to challenge the hesitation that had held him back for so long. Another part whispered quietly that it was okay to feel unsure. He stepped outside into the cool morning air. The street carried a peaceful stillness, with only a few people around. He walked slowly, letting his thoughts settle. He didn't head straight toward the meeting place. Instead, he wandered through the neighborhood, following the quiet rhythm of his footsteps. As he walked, he noticed small details. He usually overlooked the soft sway of branches overhead. A cat stretching on a windowsill, the faint smell of breakfast drifting from a nearby home. These simple things grounded him in the present moment, reminding him that not everything in life needed to be heavy or complicated. He eventually reached the small cafe near the park, where the activity group was scheduled to meet. He stood across the street, looking through the window. Inside, a handful of people were gathered around a table. They talked casually, some smiling, some speaking softly. It didn't look intimidating. It didn't look overwhelming. It simply looked like a group of people showing up just like him. Hoping to feel a little more connected, he stayed where he was for a minute, taking slow breaths. His hands were slightly cold, not from the weather, but from nerves. He almost turned around. Almost. But something inside him small, steady, told him to stay. He crossed the street. When he pushed the door open, a gentle chime rang above him. A few people looked up, but not in a way that made him uncomfortable. Their expressions were warm, open, welcoming. One of the organizers stepped forward with an easy smile. "Hi there," they said softly. "Are you here for the group?" He nodded, his voice quiet but steady. "Yes, I thought I'd give it a try." "That's all anyone needs to do," the organizer said. "We're glad you came." They guided him to the table, where the others offered small nods and smiles. He took an empty seat, unsure of what to expect. The atmosphere felt relaxed, not forced. People introduced themselves naturally, each sharing little things about their lives, hobbies, routines, simple joys. He listened at first, letting their voices blend into a gentle chorus. Slowly, without even realizing it, he found himself joining the conversation. He shared small pieces about his own life, not too personal, not too heavy, just enough to feel present. The group eventually left the cafe to begin their activity for the day, a short walk through the nearby nature trail. As they stepped onto the path, he felt the warmth of sunlight filtering through the trees. The sound of laughter drifted around him, light and genuine. He walked beside a few of the group members, talking quietly about things he never expected to discuss. With each step, he felt himself opening up a little more. He still felt moments of nervousness, but they didn't pull him back the way they used to. Instead, they reminded him of how far he had come. At one point, they stopped near a clearing with a small wooden bench. A gentle breeze moved through the tall grass. He looked around at the faces of the people who had welcomed him so easily, and something in him softened further. He realized that he didn't need to force anything. He didn't need to pretend or impress. He simply needed to show up, to try, to participate, to allow himself the chance to grow. As the walk continued, he found himself smiling more, the kind of smile that felt genuine and unplanned. He even made a small joke, surprising himself when the others laughed gently in response. It felt good. It felt natural. When the activity ended, the group returned to the cafe to wrap up. The organizer thanked everyone for coming and mentioned future meets. He felt a quiet excitement knowing he could come back if he wanted to. For the first time in a long while, a part of him genuinely wanted to, as he stepped outside. The day had turned warm, the sun resting high above the buildings. He took a slow breath and let it fill him fully. His chest felt open, as if something inside had been unlocked. He didn't go straight home. Instead, he walked through the park again, following the familiar paths. The fountain glistened in the sunlight, and he paused there. Watching the ripples shift across the surface, he sat down, feeling the cool stone beneath him. The world around him moved in a soft rhythm, children running, birds calling, leaves rustling overhead. He felt connected to it all in a way he hadn't felt before. Taking out his notebook, he opened to the page where he had written his earlier words. "Beneath, I think I'm ready to try," he added a new sentence. "I'm glad I did." The simplicity of the words made his eyes soften. It wasn't just about the group. It was about allowing himself to step forward, to be part of something again, to reclaim pieces of himself he thought he had lost. He stayed there for a while, letting the day settle around him. When he finally stood up, he felt steady in his steps, grounded in his direction. Walking home, he understood something important. Progress wasn't about dramatic changes or perfect plans. It was about small decisions, gentle courage, and giving himself permission to grow. He didn't know exactly what the future held,